Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Talking Fertility, where I come to you live at 11 a.m. every Monday morning, talking all things fertility. Now, it's lovely to be back. It has been school holidays here in Melbourne for the past 2 weeks, so I have been spending time with my family. Now, I hope you enjoyed the webinars that I had up in lieu of me being here live. We had the one with Dr. Jessup and Dr. David Knight, fertility specialists, where we delve deeper into the IVF process and why it can take multiple rounds to achieve a successful pregnancy, as well as ways to help improve your chances. And I also had the lovely webinar with fertility psychologist Kath Corcoran about the psychology of fertility. So if you missed either of those, you can find them on the Facebook page, or you can find them at the replays at conceivebaby.com.au in the podcast or the webinar area. You can also find them over at TashaJennings.com.au with the podcast or on iTunes as well. So I did have a lovely break, but it's also great to be back doing what I love doing, which is helping you conceive and carry your healthy baby. Now, today's topic stemmed from an email which I received whilst I was on my break. And it was in relation to an article I wrote recently for a newspaper. And the article was about things to avoid during preconception and pregnancy. And one of those things included phthalates and BPA. And this email was questioning whether these were really an issue. You know, how could tiny amounts of a chemical, which has been used in many household products, possibly, since the 1950s, how could this possibly have an impact on our fertility? So I thought I would break down some of the research today about BPA in particular, because it is one of the most well-known plasticizers. I'll talk about its impact on reproduction and the research, which is still ongoing as we speak. So firstly, what is BPA? Well, BPA, or bisphenol A, is a synthetic compound, and yes, it has been used since the 1950s, but the usage has increased, and it's now one of the highest volume chemicals produced worldwide. And as you are probably aware, it's commonly used in plastics like drink bottles, food containers, and other household items. Basically, it gives plastic, it's known as a plasticizer, and it gives plastics its supple and flexible quality instead of being brittle and hard. So BPA is also used in the inner lining of canned food containers to help keep the metal from breaking or corroding. And in fact, the use of BPA is so widespread that most of us have BPA in our system right now. Now, there is some contention as to whether this is a problem for our health or not. So I'll examine some of the research and some of the views on that for you today. So the European Food Safety Authority currently views BPA as safe, stating that it poses no health risk to consumers of any age group, including unborn children, infants and adolescents at current exposure levels. Now, although they have also those current exposure levels, they have reduced recommendations for what they consider a safe level, which was 50 micrograms per kilogram of body weight. They have now reduced those recommendations to under 4 micrograms per kilogram of body weight. Now, I do find that a little bit difficult to take, because how much BPA are you exposed to? I certainly don't know how much BPA milligrams per kilogram of body weight I'm exposed to. I hope very little, because I do take steps to minimize my exposure, but I certainly wouldn't know how many milligrams or micrograms per kilogram of body weight. Now, the European Chemical Agency concluded that BPA should be listed as a substance of very high concern due to its properties as an endocrine disruptor, which is what I will go into more detail today, and which is why there is particular concern about BPA in relation to its effects on fertility and reproduction and healthy pregnancy outcomes. And last year, a review of the literature currently on BPA concluded that the potential harms caused by BPA do warrant further investigation as a priority because of the association between BPA and adverse health effects, including reproductive and developmental effects and metabolic disease, all of which obviously affect fertility and our ability to conceive and carry a healthy baby. And a review by Choice concluded that there is growing scientific evidence that even at these lower levels of exposure, phthalates and BPA may be related to serious health problems, including infertility. Because of this growing evidence of these low-dose effects, the American Medical Association have called on the US government to enact federal policies to decrease public's exposure to BPA. Now, in Australia, the position of the Food Standards Australia state that there is the overwhelming weight of scientific opinion is that there is no health or safety issue at the levels people are exposed to. Although Australia has implemented a voluntary phase out of BPA in baby bottles. So, yes, there are currently conflicting views about the exact impact BPA is having on our health, if any, according to some associations. So to help you sort through all the conflicting data, I thought I'd explain a bit about what the concerns are with BPA when it comes to fertility and my recommendations on addressing, the issue of BPA. So if you would like to know more, I did do a podcast on this topic with an expert in this field, building biologist and current PhD researcher, Nicole Bajilsma. So I'll pop a link to that below for you. So firstly, why is BPA a concern in fertility? Now, as mentioned before, BPA is an endocrine disruptor due to its estrogen-like structure. So it's similar to estrogen in its structure. So BPA can bind to estrogen receptors. It may also have the ability to impact with other hormones, such as thyroid hormone receptors. And so what this does is it disrupts the delicate balance of our natural hormonal system, which is, of course, so important for reproduction and our fertility. Now, BPA has been linked to many reproductive disorders, such as polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility, endometriosis, and thyroid disease. High levels of BPA have been associated with poor outcomes of IVF, including fewer eggs, fewer embryos, and reduced live birth rates. In animal studies, it has been linked to chromosomal imbalances in the egg. And of course, if there are chromosomal imbalances in the egg, it can decrease the viability of that egg. So it may not be viable to be able to go on to create a baby. So super important, obviously. Now, the concerning thing about BPA is that it can be found throughout the body. And it has even been found in the follicular fluid surrounding those precious eggs and the endometrial tissue within the uterus as well. And one study observed that women with frequent miscarriages have about 3 times as much BPA in their blood as women who went on to have successful pregnancies. And this doesn't just relate to women. Among couples undergoing IVF, men with the highest BPA levels were 30 to 46% more likely to produce lower quality embryos. And a separate study found that men with higher BPA levels were 3 to 4 times more likely to have a low sperm concentration and low sperm count. Now, these studies that I mentioned do have their limitations. We are all genetically and metabolically different. Our ability to deal with these toxins can vary. So exposure may be harmful to some people and less so in others. And these studies done in animals may be true for humans, may not be able to be extrapolated for humans. So most authorities currently still are wanting more data before making a judgment call on BPA. However, though, there is still contention about the exact, implications on our health and, of course, on our fertility in particular, and more studies are warranted. I do agree with that. Personally, I don't want to be the guinea pig, and I don't want you to be the guinea pig either. In my opinion, there is enough evidence emerging to show that there is an effect, and we do know that it acts as an endocrine disruptor. And hormonal disturbance is certainly something which plays a huge role in fertility issues and healthy pregnancy outcomes. We do know that it is a synthetic chemical, which we now know can make its way to the follicular fluid, which is surrounding that precious egg. So when it comes to your fertility and your chances of conceiving and carrying your healthy baby, if this is one thing you can rule out, then personally, I recommend you do. So what does that look like? How do you minimize your exposure to BPA? So first of all, switch from plastics to glass or stainless steel drink bottles where you can. Also switch from storing food or leftovers in plastic containers to glass or ceramic containers where possible. Because you need to be mindful that plastics sometimes state that they are BPA free. However, the BPA is often replaced with chemicals like BPS or bisphenol S, which is proving to have similar disruptive effects on the endocrine system to BPA. So to be safe, avoid storing any food or drink in plastics. If you do use plastics, avoid those with the symbol 3 or 7 in that little triangle, the recycle symbol that you'll see on plastics. These are much more likely to have BPA in them. Also avoid heating food in plastic because that can make the chemicals leach into the food. So don't heat it in microwaves or plastics, and also don't leave drink containers in the sun. So leaving your water bottle in the car with the sunshine filtering through, that can also break down some of the plasticizers and leach them into the water in the container. And the same goes for cold. So avoid freezing foods in plastic containers because that can leach the plasticizers into the food as well. Also avoid washing them in dishwashers, which are obviously harsher than just using natural hand washing because this can break down the plasticizers as well and make them more likely to leach into the food. Have a look at your coffee and tea makers, pod systems, which I know are very popular, but they do pour boiling water through plastic into your cup. Automatic coffee makers, many of them often send water through plastics as well. So switch to a glass coffee plunger or French press. I know that's my husband's favorite, or glass or a stainless steel system. Or switch to my favorite, which is the old-fashioned pot of tea in a teapot. So the other thing is limit your canned food. As I said before, BPA is found in the lining of many canned foods. So try to get canned food, if you are using it, to be BPA free. You can find BPA free cans. And I am always looking at this. You know, if you do follow me on Instagram, you know, I make nearly all my food from scratch, always at the farmer's market. But realistically, we live in a busy world. We're all time poor. So I do use canned foods, but I always make sure that I do find BPA cans. And at least here in Australia, I have to admit it is difficult to find. There is one place that I always go to, one fruit store that's local to us here in Melbourne that I go to. But do make sure you try to seek that out and find BPA cans if you are using them, and keep them to a minimum anyway, which is what I try to do. So avoid eating too much takeaway. There's obviously a lot of reasons why we should avoid eating a lot of takeaway, but one of those reasons is because a lot of the Chinese and the Thai that you get in takeaways will be put into plastic containers, which may contain BPA. And obviously these are hot foods being put into these plastic containers, so that is likely to leach out into the food. So just another thing to keep in mind to avoid too many takeaways in plastic containers. The other area that BPA is found in is actually in receipts from cash registers. It's also found in plane tickets or concert tickets, so anywhere where they use thermal paper to print. So just avoid handling these type of tickets and receipts too much. So, I hope I've summarised some of the points on BPA, and it's still obviously a very contentious issue. So personally, I believe the take-home message with BPA is to be aware of it. It is everywhere, and the jury is somewhat out as to the exact implication on our health. But as I said earlier, in my opinion, there is enough evidence to raise my concerns. And if this is one small thing that you can do to support your fertility health, then I think why wouldn't you? It really just comes down to being aware of what products that BPA is in and that you're likely to be exposed to. Try to use those sparingly, and also to make a safer switch where possible to like glass or stainless steel instead. So I hope that's given you a little insight into BPA and what it is and why there are concerns with it around its implications in fertility health. As I said, this is an evolving topic and one that I am certainly watching, and I will be sure to bring you more information on as new research does come to hand. So thanks for joining me today. I hope that's given you some insights, and if you would like more personal support on your fertility journey, I do always make time in my diary each week for you to book in a free 15-minute consultation with me, where I can find out more about your personal fertility journey and how I can best help you. I've just been on the phone with 2 beautiful women this morning, and I also have 2 more beautiful babies due in the coming weeks, which is so exciting. And these women did start off with that initial phone call, and I've been privileged to have helped them overcome their fertility issues and now ready to give birth to their beautiful babies. So there is really nothing that fills my heart more than helping you conceive and carry your healthy baby. So if you would like that support in your journey, be sure to book in for your free consultation, and I really look forward to speaking to you. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of Talking Fertility.